Hello my babies, welcome to Dreamland Orchard. The dreamland you picked from the orchard is Missing 411 Experiences. These people shared the strange and scary experiences, where they almost ended up being a missing 411 victim. Some personal stories by Zenzoka. I've always been an avid hiker, bushman. Below are some of the stories I've heard and personally encountered. Story 1. I moved from Singapore to Australia with my family when I was only a kid and returned to Singapore to join the army when I turned 18. Compulsory for citizens even if you don't live there anymore. It was fine by me since my heart wasn't set on studies at that age. So, I got posted to this tropical island called Pulau Autakong to train as a recruit, and while there were plenty of stories of people going missing on the island, this was by far the most infamous one. The story goes that in the late 70s early 80s, Charlie Company went on a route march of 16 kilometers, carrying full battle gear, rifle and all. One recruit went missing during the march, but due to communication breakdown he was thought to have gone to report sick at the medical center. Upon returning to the bunks in the evening, they realized that he had gone missing. The whole thing eventually escalated into an island-wide search that involved all personnel on the island, but no matter how hard they looked, the search was in vain. Back in those days there was a Taoist priest who lived on the island, so they consulted him and he advised them to look for him at a particular time and spot the next morning, and they did. He was found lying 2 miles next to the route, which had been combed through plenty of times, disemboweled, with his belongings laid out and placed nicely next to him. There were also puncture marks all over his body which couldn't be explained. Story 2. This was when I was on Pulau Autakong itself training as a recruit. Part of the course required us to walk through the jungle in the middle of night alone, with sergeants stationed at various checkpoints to ensure our safety. We did a head count at the end of the whole thing and realized that one of us went missing. The company, including me, went searching for him in the middle of the dark night, and for hours we couldn't find him. What was peculiar back then was the spots of lights that was emanating from deep within the jungle. I was the one who spotted them in the first place, but other than me there was only one other guy who could see what I saw. The rest thought we were hallucinating. I was really convinced that it was the missing guy, and was so tempted to run towards it, but my gut stopped me. After a few hours later he miraculously emerged from the bush somewhere. When asked where the heck he went, he was lost for words. He couldn't remember what had happened and thought he had only taken the short path that everyone else had. Story 3. This was back in Australia in late 2000s. I've always loved the woods and I've gotten lost plenty of times, but there was this one time that really threw me off quite a bit. I went on the 4 days 3 nights hiking trip through the Stirling Ranges in Western Australia with a couple of mates. Despite having done the trek a few times before, getting lost for a bit was still quite the norm, except that one time we got lost for 5 hours. Coming down one of the peaks, we were supposed to turn left right away and sort of hug the mountain to circle to the other side. We're avid hikers and are usually quite careful, so as usual we sent one of us to scout ahead without his backpack to ensure that we were still on the right track. He came back a moment later and said he couldn't see the track, so I went down personally to take a look. Couldn't find it either, which was really weird considering that we've been there a few times before. Eventually 5 of us all went looking for that bloody left turn but couldn't find it. The thing was, I don't know what came over us, but we continued descending the mountain down a very steep slope, around 60 degrees, that it was covered in flat slippery rocks, looking for the missing left turn even though we knew full well that it wasn't far from the peak. And all the way down there were plenty of semi-beaten paths that were branching out, and on the entrance of each of them were stacks of cairns, which only God knows what they were for except to confuse the mess out of hikers. I mean, some of the marked paths led to dead ends. About 3 hours of descending and scouting, we finally sat down uncomfortably on a steep slope, and none of us said anything, but deep down everyone knew something was amiss. That was when I broke the silence and suggested we have lunch first. and we did. After lunch came voting. We either descend into the unknown and hope to get phone signal to call for pickup, or we go back up that slippery slope to find the path again. After a moment of silence, we all voted to go back up. My knees were already busted by then, so it was a real struggle to climb back up. When we finally reached that fateful turn, everyone was baffled by how ridiculously obvious it was, but yet no one saw it before. All 5 of us. By then all of us were already out of drinking water. Thank God we managed to find a fresh stream flowing off the ground, which we treated with some iodine before drinking. I think it's also worth mentioning that we got separated briefly in the mountains the night before, and were trying to determine each other's location by shouting. Boy, was that fun. Took us forever to find one another, since we didn't realize that all the shouting we were hearing was simply echoes bouncing off the mountains, coming from all the wrong directions, leading us further and further away from one another. A body of a missing 39-year-old solo female hiker was found in May, the same mountains, at the base of a steep incline, well away from public access trails, and last month saw a 51-year-old solo male hiker went missing, and found dead at the base of a steep incline too. I got a few other similar stories in other regions, like the desert and other countries, which really makes me feel lucky that I'm still around to tell these stories. Sorry if the stories told above aren't really missing 411 material and are not very interesting, just thought I'd share them with you all. Story number 2. Odd events in Yosemite National Park. Submitted by EdUps401. Hey, you guys might remember me from my recent post about hiking up to Pyramid Peak and what happened and how I was introduced to this sub. After that post I began researching the phenomena a bit, and remembered another strange experience I had while hiking up to Half Dome. This happened around August of this year. I'm not sure what we experienced, or if there was anything odd about it, but whatever. It's also a bit of a long post, sorry about that. So, this was a hike up to Half Dome. We had a campground about 20 minutes drive away from the trailhead, and the group was composed of me, 18-year male, my uncle, 32-year male, and my uncle's friend. I'll call him D. There were 2 girls with us, but they aren't relevant to the story. My uncle and his friend are both Christian, so there were no substances consumed that could induce the feelings I will be talking about. We get to our campsite, set up camp and go to sleep after eating. We plan to wake up at 4, and start the hike by 4:30. I randomly wake up at 3:30 a.m., like completely wide awake, and look out of my hammock, and I remember feeling this odd feeling as if I was woken up by something, and I remember looking out at the moonlit scene. The moon was very bright for some reason, and thinking to myself, it looks like a dream. I lay back in the hammock but can't go to sleep, and end up waking up my uncle and friend at 3:50. My uncle asks me, were you walking around at night? This is important, and I say no, and ask why. He says he woke up for some reason and could hear someone walking around, not like an animal but a person. I say weird, and we brush it off. We get to the trailhead around 4:30, and as everyone is unloading from the car, D says he's going to use the bathroom, which there are a couple of before the trailhead. I walk behind him for some time before falling behind and waiting for my uncle, who forgot something in the car. The short, straight road from the parking lot runs directly into a T intersection with the road to the trailhead, and the bathroom is directly across from the intersection through the field a little. Those who have been there know what I'm talking about. We get to the intersection and wait for D to come out of the bathroom. We wait about 10 minutes before I go and check the bathroom. He isn't there. I get back to my uncle and tell him that. He says weird, maybe he went back to the car or something, and we decide to wait a bit more. By 5:10 we begin worrying. My uncle goes to check the car, while I wait at the intersection to make sure we don't miss him if he went down the road away from the trailhead. My uncle returns, says he isn't there either. We decide maybe he went up to the trailhead without us for some reason, and walk up there in about 10 minutes. He isn't there either. We are kind of baffled now because there are no other logical places he would go. I decide to run back and check the car and bathroom again. I meet him halfway before I get to the intersection. He is sweaty and disheveled, with a weird look in his eyes. I say, "Where have you been?" He says that he went to the bathroom and when he got back to the intersection that we weren't there, and that he just assumed we went to the trailhead and started walking, and then met me. I say, "What do you mean? We waited at the intersection for over half an hour and checked at the car, bathroom, and trailhead, and you weren't there." He says, "Well, I don't know, I went to the bathroom." He then asks me where my uncle is. I say at the trailhead, and he asks me again. I tell him again, and note that it was weird that he asked me twice. As we're crossing the bridge to the trailhead, he sees a light off on the riverbank and exclaims, "Oh, maybe that him," and I just look at him and keep walking. I thought his behavior was very strange, like he wasn't thinking straight. We finally get on with the hike, and it goes by as normal, except that we seem to keep losing things, such as my uncle's small red flashlight, one of the girl's gloves, a water bottle, etc. It's like we just simply forgot about the items, and couldn't remember where we could have left them. On the way back it got dark and we turned on our flashlights, and as we near the end of the hike, after the 2 waterfalls, it begins to seem as if we've been walking for far too long. My uncle also confirms this, asking me, "Doesn't it seem like it's taking way longer to get back?" I say, "Yeah, I was just thinking that. We keep walking but it still seems we weren't making any progress. I've been on that trail many times and as I was walking I couldn't spot any familiar landmarks. It was weird, there was this odd feeling in the air, sort of a slight menacing feeling, it's hard to describe. I remember thinking it feels like the woods are alive." We remark 3 more times about how long the hike is taking and begin to laugh at it because it felt so ridiculous. After a bit we finally and suddenly find ourselves on the final stretch and make it back to the car. Now all of this seemed odd at the time, but I just brushed it off. I only realized how weird those events felt after we got home and my aunt asks my uncle, "Were you camping?" And he says, "Yeah, how did you know?" As we didn't tell them we were going since it was kind of last minute. She says that she had an odd dream, where she sees my uncle in a tent in a forest somewhere, and someone is outside of his tent. She says she couldn't see who it was but knew there was a presence there. She says she woke up around 3, and had the strong urge to pray for him, and she did. My uncle kind of looks at me after that like, "Are you hearing this schnitt?" I honestly don't know what to make of all of this, but I wanted to post it to hear your opinions. Story number 3. Weird folk tales from my grandparents. Submitted by Lost with Stuff. I'm from Southeast Asia, a small island. Up until recently, 1990s, it was undeveloped and people more or less lived near the water, with rare communities inland. My grandparents on my dad's side had all these superstitions and stories I got to experience as I'd stay there in the summer months as a kid, and I'm glad enough to remember some of them. I know it's not much but I'd like to share. Never to pee on mushrooms, even by accident. Other beings lived there, and a circle of mushrooms you should never talk negative or act negative around at all. Always be home before the plants and trees could no longer cast shadows. If it's that time but your shadow, and only yours, is cast on the ground, you need to leave the area right away. If you're in the forest at night for whatever reason, walking home and it hits that time, it's better to leave the light off than to turn it on and have other beings see you. Never play around cemeteries or places where people have died. Never step on plants around there. Never have trees too close to your house, at least 20 feet away. Not because of it falling during a storm, but because the beings that inhabit the trees would harass you and enter your home. If your name is being called and the voice isn't something or someone you recognize, then run away and don't answer or look towards the source. Happened to my grandma while she was walking home from the field. Had to go up a mountain to get there. She was walking back down to her home near the sea. Always have clear markings between your property and the forest. Had to help my grandma cut jungle growth every now and then. Also had a fence around the property. If for whatever reason you're walking in the forest and everything goes quiet all of a sudden, you had to repeat, "I'm allowed to walk here" out loud 5 times. Always walk on paths made by people, not by other things. My grandparents never explained who the other things were. Apparently they used to share the island with another group of people, not like us, but they died out long ago. My grandparents say this was the oldest story they had. They had dark skin, darker than ours, thick hair and were short of height. My grandparents never described them as evil or having bad intentions, instead they were annoying. A long time ago they'd steal food, take your chickens, take your plants, etc. They were really good at hiding in the forest and were good at fishing. Actually, if anything outside ever went missing, I'd often hear people there say, "Oh, they did it," referring to them. I was never allowed to go too deep in the forest as my grandparents believed they still existed in some pockets on the island, although they kept to themselves now. I'm mostly posting this to see if anyone on other continents has these tales too. As we become more advanced and cities get bigger everywhere, a lot of these old tales, some of them probably even older than we think, are being lost in the face of modernity. A way of living that was practiced for thousands of years is slowly being forgotten. As far as I know, the island now has stable electricity and internet was starting to be common around 5 to 8 years ago. It's a tourist hotspot now, and properties are developing everywhere. However, the geography makes it so that you can only really build near the water as the terrain is too steep or hilly in some places. Story number 4. Experience. I had a very odd experience while hiking a familiar area, not sure what to think of it. Submitted by EdUps401. Yesterday, I went hiking in Desolation Wilderness, a gorgeous area in the Sierra Nevadas. I was with 2 of my buddies, who were a little less experienced than me, and we were ascending Pyramid Peak, for those who knows what that is. About a third of the way up, I'm walking in front, and hear this noise from up in the trees in front of me. It sounded like a slow creak at first when 2 trees rub up against each other. For some reason it caught my attention even though it's pretty normal to hear those kinds of sounds. I keep walking a couple steps and hear it again. But now it sounds almost like 3 solid taps on a tree, as if you'd taken a stick and hit a tree. I stop and try to locate the sound. I say, "Did you guys hear that?" And they respond, "No." I brush it off and resume walking. I hear it again, and it is even more pronounced now. I feel this need to see where the sound is coming from, and it feels irrational. The sound repeats again and now it's off to the side, away from the trail. I almost follow it, but I'm hit with this feeling of dread. It was so clear I'm getting goosebumps as I'm typing this. Something deep inside me screams, "Don't follow." I freeze and stand there for a bit. My buddies thought I saw something and stop with me. The knocks continue, with each trio moving off a bit into the distance. My friend says, "Yo, you good?" And I turn around suddenly, and say with wide eyes, "You guys are telling me you didn't hear any of that?" And they look at me with a side eye, saying, "No, what do you mean?" I feel like a dum-dum, don't wanna make myself seem crazy and brush it off, saying never mind, it was nothing. But I couldn't brush the feeling of dread. I asked them 3 more times throughout the hike if they really hadn't heard anything, and at this point I began rationalizing it to myself that I just heard a woodpecker, and somehow got freaked out. The strangest thing is I hadn't even heard of this subreddit or phenomena, and it was only after I posted a picture I took from the peak and a user commented on it linking this subreddit, that I read up on it. I honestly don't know what to think of this, and I doubted even posting this because it sounds crazy to me to get freaked out over a couple creaks in the woods. Story number 5. An invisible helicopter? Submitted by Girl57. I hope I'm posting this in the right subreddit, and I hope some of you all are interested in what I have to tell you. If this isn't the right place, I apologize, just send me to the correct subreddit. I chose this one because we live near the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. It's about an hour and a half away by car. We live in a very rural area here in Tennessee, and all my family lives within a few miles of each other. This particular story happened to my aunt and my grandmother. My aunt lives out in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by woods, except for my grandmother's house across the road, and she was outside in her yard with her dog around noon, on a regular day. She had the dog on her leash for her regular potty break, and as she's standing there she begins to hear something. It sounded like a low-flying helicopter approaching fast. She looks up, of course, and sees nothing, but it's still getting louder. Within a few seconds of her first hearing it, she said it was directly overhead and hovering, but she still saw nothing, and no wind was blowing like it would be underneath a hovering helicopter. The dog was practically dragging her by the leash back into the house by this time, but she was curious, so she took the obviously frightened dog inside and came back out, fully expecting it to be gone. The noise was still there, and by this time my grandmother had come outside from her own house across the road to see what the noise was. It was so loud by this time that they're having to shout at each other to be heard, and they're literally less than 15 feet away from each other. It stayed for maybe 2-3 more minutes, and then moved on as quickly as it began. It didn't just quit, it decreased in volume until it was gone. Neither of them ever saw anything, and not a breath of wind stirred the trees, but they said it was like standing directly underneath a helicopter. Never heard it again since then, either, and we're all clueless as to what it could have been. I also have a few other stories about strange animals in the area that I will post separately, as I don't want this to be too long. We definitely live in an interesting area of the US. Hey my babies, if you enjoyed this Dreamland you picked from the orchard, I would just like to ask you to consider a donation, or to become a Patreon. My Patreon link is in the description. If you can't afford to and still enjoy the Dreamlands you can pick from the orchard, please like, share, and subscribe. Also, if you have a strange or scary, missing 411 experience story and would like to share, please send it to my email link in the description below. Thank you Bunchies Munchies.